Yeah. By the way, Oozaru literally means big or great monkey. That's literally the translation for it.
Oozaru.
Yeah. So Great Ape is, well, technically wrong. Actually not a terrible translation.
When you're trying to match lip flaps, probably not.
Is Great Ape actually a mistranslation? That's the topic of today's edition of Dragon Ball Dictionary. Welcome back to the channel, guys. My name is Tony. So recently I came across one of these commentary videos by the Team 4-Star guys. I don't remember what episode of Dragon Ball Z Abridged it was for, but the point is that in that video, like I showed you at the beginning, Kaiser Neko mentions that Great Ape is actually a mistranslation. So given that I actually speak Japanese, I understand Japanese, I've taught Japanese, I've done translation, I've done interpretation, I thought I'd weigh in on this topic and break down the term Great Ape. So let's start at the beginning. As I'm sure you're aware, the Great Ape form is one of Dragon Ball's most iconic transformations. It made its debut at the end of the Pilaf saga, so a very long time ago. At the time, it was a Goku-only thing, but eventually it became a Saiyan thing because Toriyama decided to make Goku an alien, and so any Saiyan that has a tail can transform into the Great Ape form. But what is Great Ape in Japanese? Well, it's Oozaru.
オーザルのフィギュアを一応全部集めました。
そして黄色のエフェクトパーツ、大猿にこの技出してましたよね。
And pay attention, it's not pronounced Oozaru, it's Oozaru. I've seen many Dragon Ball YouTube people pronounce it as Oozaru, but that is incorrect.
You all know what happens to Saiyans underneath the full moon. They turn into the mighty Great Ape or Oozaru. Ooh!
He's too much for Son Goku to handle. He's Oozaru Vegeta.
The reason for this mispronunciation is because sometimes it's written as Oozaru, but that is because it's actually a long vowel, okay? That first O is a long vowel, so that gets confusing for English speakers. In Japanese, there are these things called long vowels. They are an important part, meaningful part of the language. I know for many English speakers, you're not even going to be able to hear the difference, but this matters in Japanese.
Oozaru, Oozaru.
So the word Oozaru is made up of two parts. There's O, and then there's Zaru. O is written using the kanji or Chinese character that means big. So yes, it can be translated as big, but also great is a common translation depending on the context. As for Zaru, that's a slight variation of the Japanese word saru. And saru can mean both monkey and ape. Yes, this word can mean both. I know in English we are very picky about this, but in Japanese, generally speaking, saru can be used to mean either. For example, the movie Planet of the Apes, in Japanese, it's called Saru no Wakusei. Saru no Wakusei. As we know, in Planet of the Apes, there's a bunch of apes that have taken over the world. They're not monkeys, but in Japanese, like I said, saru can mean either, so it's called Planet of the Saru. So does that mean that there's no word equivalent to ape in Japanese? No, there is a word that means ape and only ape, and that word is ruijin.
Ruijin.
However, this word is not commonly used at all. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard a single person use it when I've been talking to them. And granted, I don't often talk about monkeys and apes, but I have heard saru come up naturally in conversation. You never hear ruijin come up in conversation. So it's a word that exists, but it tends to be used more in specialized situations. Okay, with that out of the way, we can finally answer the question, is Great Ape a mistranslation? And the answer to that question is yes and no. So what I mean is that it all depends on context. Oozaru, free of the Dragon Ball context, can be translated as Great Ape. Like I said, saru can mean ape or monkey, so there's absolutely no problem with Great Ape as a translation. However, we're talking about Dragon Ball, and in Dragon Ball, we know exactly what an Oozaru looks like. An Oozaru has a tail. In fact, the tail is an essential part of the Oozaru. When you cut off the tail, it ceases to be an Oozaru, and it reverts back to its base Saiyan form. So using the term ape in this situation does come off as kind of weird. So in this situation, monkey would have definitely been a more accurate translation. However, the story doesn't end there because I came across something kind of interesting related to the Korean dub of Dragon Ball, which I have no familiarity with, but I started looking around in Japanese on Google to see if any Dragon Ball fans in Japan had anything to say about this whole ŌZARU, Great Ape, or whatever, this whole translation issue. And I didn't come across anything in Japanese, but like I said, I came across a Korean website called NamuWiki. And this appears to be a Korean wiki style website where people can add their own information, edit information. And there was an entry about the ŌZARU, or Great Ape, or whatever. And in that entry, it said that in the presumably Korean dub that was broadcast on the Korean TV channel SBS, the Great Ape, or ŌZARU, was referred to as Super Monkey. So if you're familiar with the Korean dubs of Z and GT, because that's what the wiki entry said, Z and GT, let me know if this is true. Let me know if they referred to the ŌZARU as Super Monkey. Now, I have to say, Super Monkey does sound kind of silly, but also Great Monkey does sound kind of silly as well. So I don't know, maybe I'm just biased because I've heard the term Great Ape for decades now, and so it's become such a normal thing for not just me, but for anybody in the English-speaking Dragon Ball fandom. So Great Monkey does sound kind of weird, but technically speaking, it is the more accurate translation. But if Great Ape is a mistranslation, then why did we end up with this incorrect translation? Unfortunately, I can only speculate about this, but I suspect it may have had something to do with the fact that, well, the Great Ape is a large primate, right? And in the West, when you think of a large primate, you think of King Kong, you think of, well, maybe to a lesser extent, Mighty Joe Young, and of course, in the real world, you think of gorillas, right? So maybe the person that did the translation in this situation thought ape sounded more appropriate since we're talking about very large primates. And again, maybe Great Monkey just sounds kind of silly. So, I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it. As for me, I think the official English translation of ŌZARU should be Super Were Monkey. So, if you agree with that, let me know down in the comments, or if you have a better idea, drop me a comment. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my video about how the Dragon Ball Z dubs erased Goku's fear. See you in the next one.